Hey, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm really glad you found this place. Before I begin today's story, I want you to think about something. Think about the person in your life who has never once said, "I love you" to you out loud. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's your father. He never hugged you in public, never said the words, never called just to say he was thinking of you. But somehow, he was always there. Fixing things before you noticed they were broken, sitting quietly outside the hospital when you were sick, working double shifts without ever complaining. Today's story is about one of those fathers, and about a son who spent years being angry at him for never saying the words. This one is going to stay with you, I promise. So get comfortable, make yourself a cup of tea, and let's begin. The house on Elm Street was never a loud house. No birthday songs sung at the top of lungs, no surprise parties with balloons and streamers, no long conversations at the dinner table about feelings or dreams or fears. It was just a quiet house, and at the center of that quiet house was a man named Thomas Reed. Thomas was 6 feet tall with wide, calloused hands and a face that looked like it had seen 100 storms and survived every single one. He worked at the local steel factory, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. He woke up at 4:30 in the morning before anyone else was awake. He made coffee, always black, never sweet, drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the sun slowly come up over the old oak tree in the backyard. And then he left. Without a word, without a goodbye, without a kiss on the forehead. He just left. And every morning, his son Daniel would wake up to an empty kitchen, a still warm coffee cup in the sink, and the faint smell of machine oil that his father always carried with him. Daniel was 8 years old when he first noticed it. The absence. Not his father's physical absence. Thomas always came home by 7 p.m., sat at the head of the dinner table, ate quietly, and fell asleep in his armchair by 9. No. What Daniel noticed was the emotional absence. The way his father never came to watch his school plays, the way he never asked about his friends, the way he nodded when Daniel showed him a drawing he was proud of instead of saying, "This is wonderful, son." Just a nod. That nod, Daniel grew to hate that nod. Years passed. Daniel grew from a quiet 8-year-old into a restless, searching 17-year-old. He was smart, creative, full of ideas. He wanted to study art. He wanted to travel. He wanted a life that felt like something. But Thomas had different ideas. One evening at dinner, the same dinner table, the same quiet house, Daniel announced that he had applied to an arts college in New York. Thomas put down his fork, looked at his son for a long moment, and said, "That's not a real career." 5 words. That was it. No discussion. No, "Tell me more about this dream of yours." No. "I'm worried about your future because I love you." Just, "That's not a real career." And something in Daniel snapped. He stood up from the table so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You never support anything I do," he said. His voice was shaking. "You never come to anything. You never say anything. You never." He stopped himself, took a breath, and then said the thing he'd been carrying for 9 years. "You've never once told me you love me. Did you know that? Not once. In 17 years. The kitchen was completely silent. Thomas stared at his plate. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just picked up his fork and kept eating. Daniel walked out of the kitchen, walked upstairs, lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. The moment he turned to 18, he was leaving, and he was never looking back. Daniel kept his promise. He got a partial scholarship to the arts college. He worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. He moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and a broken radiator. And he was happy. Not perfectly happy, but the kind of happy that feels earned. He made friends who talked about feelings, who hugged each other, who said, "I'm proud of you," and meant it. He called his mother every Sunday. She told him about the neighbors, about the garden, about the old cat they'd adopted. He never asked about his father. His mother never pushed. But sometimes at the end of the call, she would say quietly, "Your father asked about you." And Daniel would say, "Okay. Just okay. Nothing more." He graduated, got a job at a small design firm, fell in love, built a life, a full, colorful, loud life, everything that the house on Elm Street was not. He came home for Christmas every year because his mother asked him to, and he could never say no to her. Those visits were always the same. His mother would cry a little when she saw him. The house would smell like pine and cinnamon, and Thomas would be sitting in his armchair, looking older than the year before, nodding when Daniel walked in. That nod, still that same nod. One Christmas, Daniel was 26. He sat across from his father after dinner while his mother washed dishes in the kitchen. The fire was crackling. The house was quiet. And out of nowhere, Daniel said, "Why, Dad? Why couldn't you ever just say it? Was it really that hard?" Thomas looked at the fire for a long time. Then he said, "My father never said it either." And then he was quiet again. Daniel waited, but there was nothing more. Just the fire, just the quiet, just 2 men sitting in a room full of unspoken things. Daniel nodded and hated himself for it, because he realized he had just done exactly what his father always did. 3 years later, Daniel got the call. It was a Tuesday morning. He was at his desk, coffee going cold beside him, working on a logo for a client. His mother's name lit up his phone. He answered. She didn't say hello. She said, "Daniel, you need to come home." Thomas had had a stroke. He was stable. The doctor said he would recover, but it had been serious enough that the whole family was shaken. Daniel drove the 6 hours home in silence. He walked into the hospital room and saw his father for the first time in almost a year. Thomas looked small in the hospital bed. That was the only word for it. Small. The man who had seemed so immovable, so solid, so permanent, looked small. His hands, those wide, calloused hands, were resting on top of the white hospital blanket, looking somehow unfamiliar. Daniel sat down in the chair beside the bed. His father opened his eyes. They looked at each other. And then Thomas did something Daniel had never seen him do before. He reached out and placed his hand over Daniel's. No words, just his hand, heavy and warm. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there with his father's hand over his and felt something shift in a place inside him that had been locked for a very long time. Thomas recovered, slowly, stubbornly, in the exact way you would expect Thomas Reed to recover, without complaint, without drama, just quietly getting better one day at a time. Daniel stayed for 2 weeks. During that time, something changed between them, not dramatically. There were no tearful confessions, no long conversations about the past. But Thomas would look up when Daniel walked into a room, would watch him pour the coffee, would sometimes say, "How's that job of yours going?" Small things, but for Thomas Reed, revolutionary things. Daniel went back to his life, called more often, came home for birthdays as well as Christmas. 2 years passed. Then On a quiet Wednesday in November, Thomas passed away in his sleep, peacefully, in his own bed, the way he would have wanted. Daniel got the call at 6 a.m. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, in the dark, not crying, just sitting. A week after the funeral, his mother called him into his father's study. It was a small room. Daniel had barely been in it as a child. It was always Thomas's space, the one room in the house that felt off limits. His mother pointed to the old wooden desk. "He kept something for you," she said. "He told me, if anything ever happened, to make sure you got it." On the desk was a wooden box. Daniel opened it. Inside were 3 things. The first, a folded piece of paper. Daniel unfolded it. It was a drawing, his drawing, the one he had shown his father when he was 8 years old, the one Thomas had responded to with just a nod. It was yellowed at the edges, carefully folded but perfectly preserved. He had kept it for 27 years. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. All those years he had spent waiting for his father to say the words. All those years of anger, of distance, of silence. And here it was, proof that love had been present the whole time, just not in the language Daniel had been listening for. Love isn't always words. Sometimes it's a drawing kept in a box for 27 years. Sometimes it's a newspaper clipping with a name circled in pen. Sometimes it's a man waking up at 4:30 a.m. every single morning. Not because he wanted to, but because someone was counting on him. Daniel had been waiting for the sentence when the whole story had already been written. The second thing in the box was a newspaper clipping. It was a small article from a local design magazine, a profile piece on Daniel's firm from 4 years ago. Someone had circled Daniel's name with a pen. Thomas had read it. Thomas had cut it out. Thomas had kept it. And the third thing, a single index card, written in his father's handwriting, slow and careful, just 4 words. "I always loved you." Daniel sat in his father's chair for a very long time. The house was quiet, the way it had always been, but it felt different now. Not empty, just full of things that had never been said out loud but had been there the whole time. In every early morning cup of coffee, in every double shift, in every nod, in a drawing kept for 27 years, in 4 words written on an index card by a man who never learned how to say them any other way. Daniel looked around the small study, at the bookshelves, at the old armchair, at the window, and for the first time in his life, he talked to his father, out loud, in an empty room. "I know, Dad," he said quietly. "I know." And that is where we leave Daniel. Not at the beginning of a relationship, but at the end of one. And somehow, at the beginning of understanding it. I think a lot of us have a Thomas in our lives, someone who shows love not through words, but through presence, through sacrifice, through a hand placed quietly over yours in a hospital room. We spend so much time waiting for people to say the thing, to use the right words, to love us the way we imagine love should look. And sometimes we miss the love that's already there, just wearing different clothes. And I want to leave you with one thought today. We live in a world that celebrates loud love, the grand gestures, the long speeches, the perfect words. But some of the deepest love you will ever receive in your life will come quietly, in a meal left warm on the stove, in a light left on when you come home late, hands that work themselves rough for you, Love isn't always words. Sometimes it's a lifetime of small actions. Look around you. It might already be there. If you still have that person in your life, maybe today is a good day to look a little closer. And if you've already lost them, I hope this story helped you feel a little less alone in that. If this story meant something to you, please like this video. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe if you want to come back for more. And leave a comment. Tell me about your thoughts. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people who love you in their own quiet way.